So there are two young fish swimming around in the water, having a nice morning, and they swim past this older fish. And the older fish says, "Morning, gents, how's the water?" The fish swim on a little bit longer, and a minute later, one young fish turns to the other young fish and says, "What the fuck is water?" Do I have your attention now? You'll get that later. Rutland likes it. That's a way homer, as we call it in the States. You'll laugh at it later. On its surface, it's a bit reductive, right? It's a simple joke about how the obvious things in front of you are most often the least obvious. Now, you may think that I'm telling you this joke to position myself as the wiser, older fish who understands the water in which we swim, and that couldn't be further from the truth, because I've been wrong about a lot of things for much of my life, but I feel like that has made me a better marketer. That willingness to embrace being wrong and forgetting that you're in the water is the danger, but it's also the opportunity. And when we talk about defining consumers and identifying who that consumer is for us, the most important part about this lame joke is to remind yourself to get in the water with them. Don't sit back. You can't study them from outside the bowl. Get in the water with them. So we're going to talk through that for a while today. We go back to defining what a consumer is for marketers and anyone trying to sell any service or commodity. It was just who was around you, right? That's all it was. Your target consumer was the person who lived around the corner. And then this happened, right? We all decided that we had a bigger idea. We had a broader notion. We wanted to grow our brand. Our brand was more important than the one next to me. And just selling to the people right next to me and right around the corner from me, well, that might not be who we want to be, right? We may have a shop in an old neighborhood, but that might be a sleepy old neighborhood, and we want something higher end. So we created identities. We created abstract notions of who we are, what our USP is. And you're going to hear Murray in that awesome head shot talk about that in a little while later. But what do we sell? We sell the notion, the idea of sport. When I was thinking through this the other day, it went back to old school television from North America and the great Jim McKay.
Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of sport, the thrill of victory, and the agony of defeat.
Agony of defeat, seriously. That, does anybody remember who that guy was? Anybody ever seen that before? His name is Binko Bogotash. And I remember that because every Saturday when that came on as a kid, I was convinced that I had just seen a man die. But he actually sprained his wrist and broke his leg, and that was about it. But I remember those words very, very vividly growing up. The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. That's what we sell, and everything in between, right? We have that abstract notion. When you're selling sport, you are selling an emotion and a feeling, and we're lucky. We get to run the gamut. We get to run the absolute gamut, and embrace that too. Don't just sell the thrill of victory. Embrace the agony of defeat as well. Look to those edges, because ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to change someone's perception of what it is that we have, whether it's a team, whether it's a company, whether it's an idea. We're changing that perception, and ultimately that perception becomes a behavioral change, and that's what we're here. That's what we're all about. And I know at this point you're probably saying, yeah, no shit, right? But there are so many different ways to attack that and so many different pieces of that puzzle. That's why I thought this slide was very appropriate. You know, the red dot is the same size on both sides. So which one do we want to be? Do you want to be the small red dot or the large red dot? It depends on what you put around it. We're going to talk about context in a minute on that. When we talk about consumers, almost always one of the first quotes that comes to my mind is from Henry Ford. And if you've heard this quote before, nod and or forgive me. But when he was asked why he was making motor cars for people, he said, because if you ask people what they wanted, they would tell you they want a faster horse. Because consumers don't know what they don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And again, when you talk about being willing to be wrong, you have to take that chance. He had no idea that we would be in the culture we're in now, but he took that chance. He had that vision, and he understood, I'm not going to provide a faster horse. I'm going to provide a very strange-looking, clunky car. But that has changed modern culture considerably, because Henry Ford knew who he was. That's what our challenge is here, right? And we're going to talk through that quite a bit today. Who are you? What is your proposition? What is your thumbprint? In our words, in our parlance, and with my team, whenever we're talking through it, I'm a hockey guy. I grew up playing hockey. So I always tell folks, I don't need two left wings. I need a left wing and a right wing and a center, and I need defense. But I don't need two left wings. So find your position. Who are you and what do you stand for? What is the thing that you and only you can do? What is your thumbprint and what is your water, if you will? So when you start talking about, okay, we'll figure out who we are. Now, who are we going to talk to, right? Because we're here ostensibly, I'm up here ostensibly to talk about how to help define that consumer base. And I'm not a big fan of demographics. I understand why they exist for a reason, and it gets us up and running, and it gets us starting to have the conversation. But too often, demographics leads you to a map like this, with hard lines, very definitive beginnings and ends of where human beings are. And human beings don't live that way. We don't live in boxes. Well, I guess I should take that back. We do live in boxes. We don't like to live in boxes. We don't like to be ring-fenced. We like to think that we have more to ourselves than that. So don't put me in a category. Don't put me in a line item. I'm more than that. So is our brand. We have to remind ourselves of that all the time. And what made me really start to think through that and change the way I perceived it, any Gen Xers in the house? Gen Xers, come on. You're all millennials. You're all disenfranchised. Come on. Where are my cynical Gen Xers? Thank you. The Breakfast Club. Does everybody remember the Breakfast Club? 30 years ago, 1986. It changed the way I thought about people. And as corny as that sounds, I think maybe I'll let Anthony Michael Hall tell it better.
Dear Mr. Byrne, we accept the fact that we had to sacrifice a whole Saturday in detention for whatever it was we did wrong. But we think you're crazy to make us write an essay telling you who we think we are. And we see us as you want to see us. In the simplest terms, with the most convenient definitions. But what we found out is that each one of us is a brain, and an athlete,
and a basket case, a princess,
and a criminal. Does that answer your question? Sincerely yours, The Breakfast Club.
We love the Simple Minds, right? Absolutely love the Simple Minds. But go back to what he just said. Embrace that notion that too often, as marketers, we view our consumers as a brain, as a jock, as a princess, as a basket case. But that's not true at all, because our consumers live in cultures. They don't live in demographics, they live in cultures. And for that, we can all thank the internet, right? The internet has broken everything and fixed everything in its own way for us. But consumers get up every morning and have access to everything that's ever happened. That wasn't the case when a lot of us were growing up. So that means that your culture is vastly different and shaped so much more widely. It used to be cultures were the same way as our consumers were. It was, who's right around the corner from you? Where was I born? What language do I speak? What food does my family serve? How do we celebrate? What do we believe in? That was a culture. A culture is completely different now. A culture is anything anybody wants to get up and pull out of their closet or pull up on their phone or their iPod and listen to that. So we have to be able to embrace all of those different cultures and figure out which ones are right for us. It's no longer about push marketing. It's no longer about, I'm just going to put everything out there and I'm going to put it in the right places and people will go. You have to be right, true to yourself. It's about pull marketing. It's about build it and they will come. It's about going to the right place for you and being within the right context and pulling those consumers to you. I love this photo, and I wish I had a higher res version of it, but this to me encapsulates how different cultures have become and how broken demographics can be. Because if you looked at these kids strictly from a demographic standpoint, the only thing that would keep them in the same realm is age. Everything else, and again, I know who these kids are because we did a focus group with them. All of these kids come from vastly, vastly different backgrounds, but they have a commonality. They have a culture. They have the culture of skate. They've embraced that. Whether you're a black kid from Bed-Stuy, whether you're a white kid from Long Island, whether you're an Asian kid from Chinatown, they all came together through a culture that would never have been defined as that even 20 years ago, even 15 years ago. People would have said, oh, that's a sport. That's just a sport. A sport is a culture. Let's be really honest with ourselves. It's a cult. Cult is short for that, right? That's what we're selling. We're selling that belief, that notion that I belong and I feel so passionately about this, that's who I am and where I live. Now, the interesting thing is, every single one of these guys get up the next morning and give you a different answer. Because they did, because we met with some of them. Some of them went and played baseball the next day. Some of them went to music class. Some of them played basketball. They chose their culture every single day. So as they continue to morph and change, especially the millennial generation, when you talk about the millennial generation, they call themselves slashers because it's I'm this/that. So if you as a brand and as a marketer are going to try to chase slash, you're going to come off as completely inconsistent and completely inauthentic. So you have to be who you are for all the right reasons and let slashers find you to a large extent. And that's different. That's broken for a lot of marketers. And a lot of marketers think, no, I'm not going to trust them to come to me. But we're going to talk about that in a minute to make sure that we can be in the right places. A little bit more about demographics. Football nut, Arsenal nut. So when I found this one, I chose that to be the graphic. But this is the way a demographic would look if you looked at Premiership football in London. This is the way a culturist would look at it. As you can see, vastly different. Hard lines, single points, that's where you're from. If you're an Arsenal supporter, you live in that area. This says, yeah, if you're an Arsenal supporter, there's probably more of you living in that area to a certain extent, but they're all over the place. You can find those red dots. You can find the yellow dots elsewhere as well. That's the difference. So when you think about it, picture those two things. Picture that map with those hard lines. Picture the map that looks like it's a bit of a Jackson Pollock nightmare, but that's what Premiership truly looks like in London. So come with me on this one. So you talk about, okay, you lose demographics. So I lost specifics, right? So I don't know their age, or maybe I do. I don't know where they're from. I don't know where they live because they live all over the place, and I sort of know some of the things they like. That's why people default back to demos a lot. I would posit that we live in a proper noun culture. We live in a proper noun world. That's where you can start to find your specifics. No one says, very few people say, I went to a game last night, right? No one says that. They say, I went to State of Origin, or Ben was kind enough to take us on a tour of most of Sydney's train stops, and we got to go we saw the Rabbitohs lose terribly to the Broncos. But no one says, I went to a game last night. Say, I went to go see the Rabbitohs play. I went to go see the Broncos play. I went to State of Origin. You know, very few people say, yeah, I like soccer teams. I love the Arsenal, right? I hate Chelsea, right? It's proper nouns. And this one takes a little bit of explanation, but I'm going back to my childhood again, so apologies. But this one always pops into my head when you talk about what's the difference between specific and non-specific, and this was really kind of my first iteration of learning that. I also think it's a really catchy jingle, and you're going to be singing it in your head for the rest of the day. So you can blame me later for this one.
sarsaparilla. And I could say that Rufus found a kangaroo. They found Rufus home and now the kangaroo belongs to Rufus Xavier sarsaparilla. I could say that, but I don't have to, cause I got pronouns. I can say he found a kangaroo to follow him home, and now it is his. You see, he never knew about.
I'll leave it at that. Rufus Xavier sarsaparilla, he had an armadillo. That'll be in your head for the rest of the day, but think about that, right? Ditch the pronouns. It's not he, him, and her. It's not she, it, there. It's very, very specific. Because if you don't have those specifics, a rugby match could be this, or it could be this. That's a big difference when we're talking about the passion of our consumers. So be very, very specific and dig into that. We want this mass thinking. We want everyone to feel the same way, because we do sell, again, culture, whatever you want to call it. We sell the broad idea. We sell, a lot of people would be critical of us and say it's mass thinking, and it's not mass thinking, because every single one of our consumers and every single one of these fans, they're having their own experience. Yes, it's shared, but not, they're not all having the same experience that the kid in the middle is having. He's having that experience. Only him. And the girl next to him, she's having her experience. Only her. So my point is, again, we can thank the internet for that. This generation, certainly, and millennials, when you do a survey, when you talk with millennials, they don't want to be famous. They assume they will be famous, because fame has taken a completely different turn, and it means different things. Again, being wrong, missing out on that decision-making process and allowing it to phase into the next. So where I'm taking this is that we have to make sure that our connections are personal. That's one of my beefs with social media, and Gab will talk about it later. It's very social, but it's not personal. Our consumers, they seek personal, especially Gen X, my generation. We don't care. We don't want it. We're jaded, right? The millennial, they want personal. It's meaningful for them. The problem is social media is not personal. It's social. Who's that person? We all know that person who comes in the room and just blabs everything, Oh, my day. Oh, last night. They're social. They're not personal. So take social media and make it personal. Make sure that you're connecting as much as you possibly can with those consumers with your fingerprint in their water. So when you do that consumer research, it can be difficult. We've all been in focus groups, and I've been in some focus groups that go like this.
How many of you kids would like Itchy and Scratchy to deal with real-life problems like the ones you face every day? And who would like to see them do just the opposite, getting into far-out situations involving robots and magic powers? So you want a realistic, down-to-earth show that's completely off the wall and swarming with magic robots.
Good. And also, you should win things by watching.
You kids don't know what you want. That's why you're still kids, because you're stupid. Just tell me what's wrong with the freaking show.
We've all been there. We've all been on the other side of the window, of the mirror, the coughing mirror, right, that everyone pretends isn't there. Because it's really hard. It's really hard to get people to tell you exactly what they want. And there's always that person who can send everything sideways. Consumer research is really, really tricky. It can be really, really difficult. I've heard it said that consumer research can be like a string of lampposts for a drunk trying to get home after a long night at the bar. Because you can either go to that first one and just cling to it and hope that either the sun comes up or somebody comes and finds you. And we all do that. There's that one thing that one person said on that one survey, and you're like, that's true. Please just let that be true. I don't want to go any further. Or you can find it to get to the next one, to get to the next one, to get to the next one, to get to the insight. Because insights are very rarely handed to us full stock, right? They're wrapped in the riddle, in the enigma, inside the onion, or however many metaphors I can wrap into the wrapping metaphor. But be sure to look at that stuff critically. And again, if you know who you are, if you absolutely know who you are, and you have your fingerprint sorted out, this will help you redefine it, or will help you reestablish it and legitimize it, not redefining it. Again, if you know who you are, you can get home. If you don't, you're going to cling to the lamppost in the snow and hope that somebody comes and finds you when it's light. So what do we do when we take all this mess of ideas that I'm throwing out to you? How do we bring it to life? And I would, everybody here, lots of folks play chess, Bobby Fischer, and all that stuff. If you play chess, you know that the most important piece on the board is the king, because that's how you win or lose. I would argue that for us, content is king, because that's how you win or lose, is getting that content out there. But everyone knows also, if you play chess and you're halfway decent at it, that the most useful piece on the board, the most strategic piece on the board, is the queen. And I would argue that context is queen. It's where you put it. The content is great. You have to have it. That's who we are. But we often forget about where we put it. And that becomes so critical for what we're doing. Again, the context being the queen. Because we don't like repetition as human beings. We like patterns. If you repeat something over and over again, the human brain shuts it off after the 5th or 6th time. That's been proven in my house several times, and I say, brush your teeth, brush your teeth, brush your teeth, brush your teeth. And by the 5th one, they've started a new game of FIFA, and they haven't listened to a damn word I've said. We seek patterns, and the human brain functions via patterns. The face is probably the best example of that. There are very clear patterns within the face. Now, it comes in a wide variety of formats. One would argue that that's not repetition at all. That's a pattern. That's how we think. That's how we process information, and that's how we seek it out. So find those natural patterns in your communication schedules and your rhythm of the game. Every game has a rhythm, and we know that. And again, that's not repetition. That's a pattern. And seek ways to tweak that a little bit. You know, listen to Mozart. Listen to the Sex Pistols. It doesn't matter. It's a pattern. It's not repetition. You know, it comes back to certain things, and then it goes to something different, and then it comes back. Have fun with that. Play with that notion of contextual rhythms. We have it in sport, obviously. It's in everything we do. Again, it's that rhythm of the game. We find that everywhere, that the rhythm within sport is there. That's our water, right? That's our pattern.
This is water. We're just in it.
It's water.
Now, you're going to take a few questions
Yes,
now,
absolutely.
I think, from people now. Has everyone downloaded the app? Have they got the app on their phone in front of them? You'll see that there is a screen on the app that allows you to ask a question. If you want to submit a question there, it'll come straight up to me and I can ask John directly. Everyone got that? Everyone sorted that out? You can sort of see it on the app there. It's pretty straightforward. If you don't have your phone on you, if you still want to ask a question, put your hand up and we'll come around with a microphone. But otherwise, you can directly...
The analog version is fine. The analog
The analog is your arm.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Nike when you talk about, finding the slasher, especially Nike Golf. How do you sort of define who Nike is for that audience, in particular, in terms of what you guys did?
For us, for golf, it's a really different proposition because golf is such a traditional sport and has been around for a while. And Nike Golf is relatively new to the industry. We've been there since 1986, but really, most people would recognize Nike Golf from the moment that Tiger won the Masters in '97. So everyone says, "Okay, you're there." But Titleist and FootJoy and so many other companies have been around for a long time. We feel our take on it is where we're always going to win, again, being true to ourselves and swimming in our own water, is the athletic side of it. So we look at our consumers as modern golf athletes, so that we want to bring a new edge to it, we want to bring a new fashion to it, but we want to bring a new level of athleticism to golf. We feel that we have that right to be able to make that claim because Tiger was the guy who went from the skinny kid to showing up a year later with the tight red shirt on and the enormous biceps, and he changed the game. Now Jason Day, Rory, all of our guys and lots of other golf athletes are truly not just golfers. We believe that if you're a golfer, you're an athlete. So, our take on it has always been that side of things, is to take it a little less traditional, stay true to the game, but make sure we're dialing up the athleticism of the game.
Benny has asked, you talked about at the start that you've been wrong plenty of times in marketing. Can you tell us about one of those times and something you might have learnt from that sort of changed your perspective?
Absolutely. I think the one that sticks out the most for me was probably about 2008. I was working in global basketball at the time. And one of the young kids who was working for me, he was freshly out of his, business school program, came barging into my office and was like, Hess. There's this thing, it's on the internet, it's an app or whatever, and 140 characters. You only have 140 characters, and it's going to blow up, and people are going to be all over it. And I said, all right, I'm already not listening, but what's it called? And he said, Twitter. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Get out of my office. Needless to say, I was dead wrong. And a few months later, we were back at it. And we were one of the first categories at Nike to be on the Twitter platform and other social media platforms. So it was my willingness to look around, do a little bit more research, and stop always, the gut reaction is very, very valuable a lot of times. But you have to, rethink things and come back to it. And luckily, the guy who came into my office and was pitching me on Twitter was just relentless, and he was a bit of a badger. So he was back in about 2 hours later, and finally I said, all right, let's talk about it. And there we were.
And was that sort of a watershed in many ways of going, okay, there are things happening that I may not be aware of, that might seem stupid or that I don't understand, that I really need to pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, it's the faster horse model, right? We don't know what we don't know. And my catch for myself was I wasn't swimming in their water. I had, climbed up into the ivory tower of marketing where we think, oh, well, we know everything. Certainly, at Nike we know enough, but I'm in Beaverton, Oregon. I'm much older than our consumer target at the time. Still am, oddly enough. But it was a moment of climbing down from the tower and jumping into the water and saying, okay, what does this feel like? What are people actually doing?
Jeff's asking, what sort of activities or what sort of things do you guys do with your team to make sure you understand that you're actually swimming in the water with your actual consumers?
We're out and about all the time, honestly. It's not just being on social media. That's a part of it. For us, twist my arm, one of the things about working in golf that's just horrible is I have to go out and play a lot of golf. And so, but what I don't always do is go play the big fancy courses. It'd be really easy to go to LA and say, well, I'm going to play Riviera, and then I'm going to go to Pelican Hill, maybe I'll make my way down and play Torrey Pines.
This sounds awful.
Sounds terrible. It sounds awful, but that's not what we do. Honestly, we go play the Munis on a Saturday morning. And you don't tell anybody who you are, right? You don't show up all geared up. You show up in cargo shorts and sometimes flip-flops and a T-shirt and just play, because that's water.
And what do you think you learn from that specifically, like being on the ground with actual
You get
social
absolutely
play?
Unedited takes.
Yeah.
Unedited, that's the beauty of it. And you'll bring it up and we'll plant it. We'll have maybe like a new driver or a new ball or something, or somebody will be wearing, if we've got like some new edgy shoes or something, and one of us will wear them. And you just wait to see what somebody says. Somebody goes, oh, that's wicked. Those are absolutely ridiculous. Why in the world would you wear those? Why is the driver blue? Oh, shit, I don't know. We don't have an answer, right? So a lot of times they ask the questions. And they can seem like sort of the small potatoes versions, but that's the big stuff, because those are the insights. We always listen to the voice of the athlete. And that doesn't mean we listen to Rory McIlroy and Suzanne Patterson and LeBron James. That means we listen to the kid who, basically swiped his clubs out of the basement from his older brother who doesn't play anymore, and he just thought, maybe I'll go do this. That's the voice of the athlete. That's every bit as important.
Ryan has asked us, should marketers and content producers spend their time trying to get ahead of the game or getting their game in order? What do you think is the biggest out of those two? Well,
I think those are sequential, they're causal. So get your game in order, right? And then jump ahead of the game. Because, again, don't cater. The world doesn't need we need caterers to bring us food. The world doesn't need brand caterers, right? I don't want you to, so everybody says blue shirts? Okay, let's go make blue shirts. Doesn't matter. What's right for you? Find some of those trends and pick out the ones that are moving forward and ahead of you and pull the game forward. I mean, we're constantly evolving everything, whether it's fashion, music. I mean, I'm a muso, I'm a music nut, and I have often dreamt about what it would be like to go back in time and show 1996 Hess an iPad and just watch my brain explode, right? Like just say, that Walkman you've got, that's awesome. Take that tape out, snap it in half, throw the rest of it on the ground, and you see that? Yeah, well, you're gonna have all your music on that. Because, every bit of music that's ever been made, that's right there. Oh, no, it doesn't cost much at all. It's cheap. We get them at, award shows and stuff. You get them away, give them away. That would be amazing to be able to go back and have that moment because someone completely broke the rules. They just stepped around it, or ahead of it, and beside it. Those are the moments that I think as marketers, that's where we can build our credibility, but that's the exciting stuff. Breaking the rules, getting out in front of it, scaring people in a good way, that's fun.
This is from Simon. How do you bring the voice of your consumers into your brand communication?
Well, again, it goes back to the athlete. So we feel that the voice of the athlete, whether it's Rory McIlroy or, the young woman who just started playing, we feel like there's an authenticity and a truth to that. So may sound kind of like a reductive, simple answer, but for us, it's the voice of the athlete. So as long as we're true to that, we'll always be authentic and right.
And from Matt, what are the top 3 things you love to see when media owners pitch you new business? What are the things you like to see from the media owners?
First, I like to see stuff I've never seen before. And even if they're not sure it's actually going to happen, I want to see that. I want to see that they understand the space. Again, sorry to beat that analogy, but that they're in the water with us. And then just that partnership, as cliche as it sounds, is just making sure that they're basically an extended member of your brand team, and they're willing to do that with you and find that partnership.
In terms of being a massive brand like Nike, what are some of the challenges you think that some of the smaller brands have that when technology and the consumer is changing so quickly?
I honestly feel like it's an advantage for smaller brands because you're nimble, you're smaller, and you can make those changes. You can define yourself and find those spaces, and you can move through the parameters a little bit more easily. At a company the size of Nike, we're turning the Queen Mary sometimes when we're all right, well, we're going to shift. We're going to go from this platform and we're going to focus over here. Or recently we've said, we're always about inspiration and innovation, but we're going to add this notion of service as well. That's an enormous undertaking for a company that size to get everyone on board. When you're a smaller company, and ideally, hopefully, everyone has been there from the jump to a certain extent, but there's that passion that's ingrained in it. You don't have to get everyone internally on board before you show something to the consumer. Whereas for us, it takes us a little bit longer. We feel like we're very, very streamlined, and we do a really good job of getting things to the marketplace, whether it's product or an idea or a service. But we're still never going to be able to do it as quickly as a smaller company.
Carl's asking about what you guys at Night Golf do with the PGA themselves to move the game forward.
Yep.
I mean, is it a pretty synchronized relationship?
It is. I mean, we're partnered with the European Tour, the PGA Tour, Royal and Ancient, and it's like any relationship with a brand and a league. I'm sure you have it here with AFL. We have it with all of the leagues that Nike's partnered with. Is that there are two brands basically competing with one another at that point, and you have to find that 51-49. You're walking with it all the time. But we had several meetings with them this spring where we were trying to bring out some new gear, some new fashions, some new looks that they weren't quite ready for yet. We're always trying to push things forward from an innovation standpoint and say, hey, we've got a new ball club combo, but it's going to go a little bit farther than what your regulations say we can. We feel that we could make this that much better for consumers. And at the end, what we're always trying to do is grow the game.
Can you talk just a little bit about when Nike first jumped into golf? I mean, that was a time when sort of they were more associated with NBA and they were associated with, track and field and football, I guess. Like, what's the transition and how do you go, okay, we're going to get into a sport we have never been involved with before?
I wasn't there at the time because that was a while ago, but basically the idea was, okay, do we have enough people here internally that understand and inherently know the game? And if we don't, how can we go find those people to help us? But the decision honestly was made that, hey, we feel that there's an opportunity, there's growth there. We saw that the game was starting to grow. We saw the opportunity with Tiger, and we saw a chance to go be very, very disruptive and take an old sleepy game and turn it on its ear and make it better for everyone. So the decision was somewhat commercial, but a lot of it was we have an opportunity to go stir things up and make this really, really interesting and grow the game for everyone.
Is that a sort of a great lesson, do you think, in many ways, for people who think that's not necessarily our field, our sphere, but you can reshape it just with the right people?
Again, take those risks, take those chances, and it's easier to say from a big company because you've got more you can fall back on. But if you go back and look at Nike, go back and look at the sports that we have been in and gotten out of over the years. I mean, we got in and out of skateboarding 3 or 4 different times before we finally got it right. And now we're very, intrinsic and very authentic in the skateboarding space. We're in the water, if you will. Same thing with golf. When we first came on, the golf world didn't want anything to do with us. We were big, ugly Nike. You don't get it. You're going to come in here and mess things up. And you have to, again, be true to yourself, but be somewhat relevant, or not somewhat relevant, be relevant, but somewhat, respectful of the traditions. It was wonderful. I mean, like I said, I was in basketball when we signed LeBron and brought him on, so I knew him from when he was an 18-year-old kid, and all the ups and downs and everything that he went through. For them to come back from a 3-1 deficit and win the O'Brien Trophy this past summer it was a ton of fun. It was extraordinary. And at Nike, we're all there. We're like any place else. I jokingly say, if you got 5 people in the room, you got 10 opinions. But that was one thing we could all agree on. There were a handful of folks from the San Francisco Bay Area who were voting for, rooting for the Warriors. But for the most part, we all just wanted to see him win that so badly for Cleveland and get that redemption. It was a lot of fun.
And I guess, is that a great moment, knowing that what you're doing is sort of, in a sense, bigger than just selling people gear,
Yeah.
that there's a story there and people were crying in the streets,
Absolutely. I mean, at my most cynical moments, somebody says, what do you do? And you say, well, I, sell gear to kids who maybe might not be able to afford it, right? That's your dark moment. And you go, oh, shit. Your big moments, the moments you love, are the moments when you say, I sell inspiration. I sell the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat and everything in between. So those are the moments when you're really, really proud of what you do. And, all work is good and bad, and you take the good with the bad. And those are the moments that can overshadow and really lift up any of the frustrating meetings or the long travel or the annoying person who won't stop asking questions or whatever those moments are that we all experience. We get to counter those with sharing in a win like that.
Fantastic. What a story. John Hess, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, John.